From Community Public Radio, this is the CPR News. From New York, I'm Don DeBar. Today we go to Philadelphia to speak with Professor Tony Montero of the Saturday Free School in Philadelphia. Professor Montero, welcome.
Thank you very much, Don.
So, I guess we had some interesting things happen this past election day. Let's discuss that.
Well, November 2nd, 2021, once again is an eruption on the landscape of American politics, where the voters said, at least in Virginia and New Jersey, and probably beyond those places, definitely beyond those places, not probably, that the 2020 election of Biden did not end the rage and anger and sense of illegitimacy of the governing class and of the ruling elite. And if you take Virginia, which is being followed and has been followed much more closely than New Jersey, 33% of the people in exit polling said that the top issue for them in the way they voted was the economy. And it's probably clear that those for whom the economy was the top issue voted against the Democrat, Terry McAuliffe. And for the Republican, Glenn, how do you pronounce his name now? Forgive me. Whatever his name is.
Glenn Youngkin. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Youngkin voted for him. A really unknown, outside of the political political game guy. I mean, he's more like a Trump in being an outsider in politics.
And he had Trump support too, right? Trump
had Trump support. Yeah. And that was very significant in especially the rural areas, and in particular in Southwest Virginia. And of course, the election indicated a really deep and profound class division. The Democratic Party in Virginia, as is the case throughout the country, is an elite, mainly upper middle class at its base. The 1%, including finance, capital, the banks, high tech, the military, the intelligence services, at its core leadership. So a defeat for McAuliffe, a Clinton flunky and servant, was a big defeat for the elites of the Democratic Party. I would just say one other thing. This was a blow against the Biden presidency. While Biden is talking about Build Back Better, not only in the United States, and I put quotes around that better, but he's also talking about we're back in foreign affairs, that, we are the vanguard of the struggle for democracy and the anti-China, anti-Russia thrust of his foreign policy. I think all of that suffered a setback on Tuesday, and especially in Virginia, where the stakes were even higher than anywhere else. But even if you take New Jersey, that the sitting governor, who was expected to just sweep to victory, barely made it over the line, barely made it. And a guy who only spent $153 on his campaign and only had a Facebook campaign defeated the sitting Speaker of the New Jersey Senate. It's just this is a real blowback against the, quote, liberal elites having taken power back. And what is clear to me, that the country is increasingly moving to ungovernability. The Democrats can't govern. This $3.5 trillion so-called human infrastructure bill is not going to pass, I would argue, maybe in any form. And so the Democrats enter the 2022 election completely naked, completely exposed, and their ambition to, as part of this, capitalist reset, this rebranding of capitalism and of the ruling elite has failed. And that is the key thing. The ruling elites, the Wall Streeters, the Silicon Valleyers, the military, the intelligence services have suffered a setback as a result of the November 2nd election.
You know what's interesting? I'm listening to you rattle off each of the individual items there, and I'm having a vision of the stage at the 2016 Democratic Convention where Terry McAuliffe was the head guy, by the way. He was Clinton's main person for that election. And they were parading exactly that group of people across the stage, the intelligence agencies and the military and the whole lot of them, big corporations, Michael Bloomberg, the whole bit. And they lost that election.
But the interesting thing is, sadly, they had Reverend, the guy that's leading the Poor People's Moral Campaign, that Reverend, he was sadly mixed up in that crowd on the stage on that day, or at least he spoke before them, and then they came. So, that mess of contradictions.
Right.
The guy, Reverend Barber is his name.
Yeah.
Reverend Barber's moral crusade is on the stage with the most deadly, genocidal militarists the world has ever seen.
Quite
He's
a
for moral remaking of the United States, but he's sadly in a coalition with some of the greatest killers humanity has ever known.
I would call that a moral remaking of the legacy of Martin Luther King, actually, because
a moral degradation.
Yeah, exactly, a sacrilege. To use the terminology of his profession, a sacrilege.
Thank you.
It's of the nominal profession. The other one is the old one, the world's oldest profession, they say, right? All right. So let's look at a little history, for example, in Virginia, the turnout. In 1997, they have an election every 4 years for governor in Virginia. In 1997, the Republican won with 969,062 votes as against the Democrat with 738,971. In other words, about 1.6 million to 1.7 million people turned out. 4 years later, the turnout was 1.9 million. That was when Tim Kaine won, and Tim Kaine was also very prominent in the 2016 election. He was the vice presidential candidate with Hillary Clinton. He won with 1 million votes, 1,025,942 against the Republican at 912,327. So a total of, again, about 1.937 million, just shy of 2 million voters turned out. 2009, you had almost the same numbers. You had 1,163,523 for the Republican and 818,909 for the Democrat. So again, about 1.9 and change million voters, slightly higher than the previous year. 2013, when McAuliffe got elected, he got elected with 1,069,789 against the Republican, who had 1,013,354. And the Libertarian candidate pulled 146,000 votes, too. So you had then just a little over, about 2.1 million almost people voting then. In 2017, the Democrat Northam won with 1.409 million against 1.175 million for the Republican. So about 2.5, almost 2.6 million votes. This time, Youngkin got 1.668935, or almost 1,700,000, and McAuliffe got 1.588118. In other words, there were about 3.3 million votes, about 25 to 30% over the last election. And McAuliffe got almost twice as many votes losing now as he got winning 8 years ago.
Right. About a little over 500,000 more people voted for him in losing than in winning,
right.
And the Republican got about 600,000 more votes. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep, that's right.
I mean, in other words, this was a large turnout throughout the state, and it was, I guess you have to say, without any fear of being contradicted, that this was a referendum, and the people of Virginia saw it as a referendum.
Yep.
Now, of course, the Democrats are going to say that the issue was critical race theory and
right.
what is being taught in the classrooms.
Right.
I am arguing, based upon exit polls, that it was the economy.
Right.
And the economy was driving this election. I think, Don, you and I, from 2015 up till today, have always said that the economic, or what in more precise terms are the class issues,
right.
are fundamental, though unspoken of, by the, quote, woke elite and woke capitalists.
And by the media. And here's the kicker.
But they're part of the woke elite.
Right.
Yes, they're driving this.
We were looking in 2016 at this question, and while we were looking at the polls, noticed that these key words, job, employment, things that had to do with a person's ability to pay their bills and have some relative, comfort in their situation, were absent from the polls. From that, you could run the whole, not just the questionnaire, but the compilation of data and everything. Those words were not in the documents. And so whatever was being measured wasn't that. And as we saw when we were at both conventions, talking to people that were there, your main concern, we were asking the people at the Republican convention, haven't you always voted over abortion and over gay marriage and all this stuff? And don't you realize Trump is not anti-abortion and he actually is not hostile to gay marriage? And they were like, we don't care. He's going to get my job back. That's what we were hearing. And we were hearing that also from people who were supporting Sanders at the Democratic convention.
Right, there's no question about it.
And they weren't whispering it either.
No. And these economic issues, and this, of course, goes back to the 2008 financial collapse and the fact that most working people and lower middle class people have never recovered. And therefore, the majority of the working class, be they organized or unorganized, have drifted away from the Democratic Party in spite of what the leadership of the unions are doing. Right. This is a huge split between the rank and file of the working class and the leadership of unions. And a big thing back, if you remember back in 2016, was the Trans-Pacific Partnership and NAFTA, renegotiating NAFTA and taking the Trans-Pacific Partnership off of the table. Yep. Trump did both of those things.
That's right.
And that put him in decent stead with a good part of the working class, especially in those deindustrialized areas like Cleveland is, and the Republican Party convention was in Cleveland in 2016,
right.
or as Philadelphia is. These are deindustrialized parts of the country. They are very poor parts of the country. Now the economic issues center upon inflation. This hardcore attack upon the standard of living of working people. Their wages, even if they're getting the $15 minimum or a little more, wages are not keeping up with inflation, especially of basic things for working people like food and the cost of fuel to put in your car or to heat your home.
Yep. It's a cute game that's played here. You have the bulk of the voters, the motivated voters for both parties, having pretty much the same economic condition. The ones on the ground, the foot soldiers. And however, rather than commenting on that, I mean, this is the phenomenon that I'm going to admit you pointed out to me back in 2015 to use as a lens for looking at that election and the other things that were going on at the time. What happens is the media covers it, and the talking heads from the parties cover it, and the people in the not-for-profit industrial complex cover it. You can find knuckleheads, for example, that are going to vote Republican, that are Republican Party, operatives, members, part of the architecture, that will say we organized people that are worried about critical race theory, and that is why the McAuliffe lost. And they attempt to claim it in the same way that the tag was put on Nader about Florida in 2000, and he ran away from it. What you do with that thing, regardless of how real it is what matters. Nader walked away from it, so the Green Party never threatened to or did, in fact, use its power at the margins to get expression in the making of policy. Here, the phenomenon that actually exists, and is evident if you're looking at the data, is masked between people who will come to the forefront and say, see, critical race theory is evil, etc., and other people will say, see, they are racists.
Yeah.
And so these two sets of people that are in the same economic condition end up pointing fingers at each other over something that neither of them really cares about.
Right. And see, the other thing is do people or certain people understand, quote unquote, critical race theory as a stand-in for an elite trying to impose their values and their philosophies upon ordinary people? Because the fact of the matter is, no matter what is taught, whether it's critical race theory or the 1619 Project or settler colonialism, these are not ideas which have emerged organically from a political dialogue at the level of the masses of people. They come from outside of the people and are part of an elite ideological attack upon sizable sections of the working class. I don't care how you cut it.
Right.
And the working people, and this goes not just for white people, this goes for black folk, this goes for Latinos, this goes for Asians, want to know what all of this means. I mean, just like, to bring up Dave Chappelle in his Netflix thing, comedy thing, stand-up thing that he recently did. On the LGBTQ and trans question, I mean, he spoke what most black people feel, that LGBTQ is a white movement, a white ideological movement to kind of put in a corner the continuing aspirations and struggle of black people for freedom and full equality.
Right.
And, even black LGBTQ, trans people agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, black LGBTQ people agree more with Dave Chappelle than they do with the white LGBTQ movement. No. Now tell me what that's telling you.
Right. Hey, the little parable that he told in the midst of that piece that's so controversial, where he's in a restaurant, he sees somebody who's videotaping him. They're doing one of these things where you see a star, you turn on your camera, you have somebody go provoke them so you can get some kind of sensational thing on your camera and upload it to YouTube and get 1 million hits. Yeah. There was a trans woman, a person, a male presenting as a woman, sitting at the table and sent somebody over to start something with him. And he went over, seeing the camera, calling what was going on, and, said, I ought to smack you in the head or something to the person. And they stood up. They were twice his size and very broad. And what did they do? Instead of punching him in the face, they called the police. And he said, rightly, if this were a black trans woman, the last person that person would call is the police. And that what this guy did while he kept presenting as a woman was suddenly presented first and primarily as white.
Yeah. So, see, and what Dave Chappelle showed, or what he pointed out, that there's a difference between an elite imposed set of ideas and ways of being in the world and the reality of being in the world of ordinary people. Yeah. And he's absolutely right. Yeah. And it gets back to this question of the class division. And the class division is so severe that it impacts ideology, it impacts what is viewed as racist or not, because if the elite, and by that I mean a lot of these people coming out of these elite universities and graduate seminars and writing books and all that other thing, if they are the arbiters of what is racist and what is not, that means that everything is predisposed to favor the ruling elite. I hope I made myself clear.
Yeah. Look, essentially it's this. If the elite controls the... Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just finish it. You see, we are in the throes of one of the great ideological struggles in the history of the United States. Right. Who wins this struggle wins the future. Yep. And people are participating in this in many ways that we don't even know about. And so if they don't accept or embrace a ruling class idea of what should be taught in schools, because they say this is nothing but a rebranding. They might not put it this way, but this is a rebranding of capitalism to favor people that don't have my interest at heart.
Yep.
That are opposite in the class division than I am.
Yeah, they're on the other side.
On the other side, yes.
When those people control the education system, the means of communication,
right,
everything through which, the set of prisms through which culture passes before it reaches your eyes, then the painting you're going to get through that, whether it's made up of little dots or oils or charcoal, whatever, that painting is going to be their picture of reality designed for you. And its purpose is to keep you where you are in relation to them and their power.
That's right.
Obviously, that's what's going to happen. And that set of, that palette that they have to work with now has gone from, 8 colors or whatever, past 64 crayons in a box, to huge supercomputers that can generate, almost by voice activation, 3-dimensional imagery that can move and talk and sing and play guitar. Okay. So, we're talking about an elite that's armed with every weapon possible to dominate the conception of reality that is in the minds of the working class. And they're one of the things that's primary, in terms of the task before them is to keep us at each other's throats and away from their money.
That's right. And, let me just say another. I think this is very, very significant. This is why the Virginia gubernatorial race was so important. Not because of Youngkin, not because of the Republican Party, not even because of Trump, but it's because people decided to push back. That's right. You can't underestimate. This is a year after the 2020 election, where Biden barely scraped through in terms of the electoral vote. I mean, there's still questions about the legitimacy of that vote in places like Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, even Arizona. Still questions, and those questions are legitimate questions. But putting that aside, people push back based upon their own sense of, we voted for Biden in 2020, and that's why that suburban, exurban vote is so important. And let's not forget, Biden took Virginia by 10 percentage points a year ago.
Yep.
And he couldn't carry it. He spoke there. Kamala Harris spoke there. Barack Obama spoke there. I even think Hillary Clinton showed up. But they could not hold on to Virginia. And the question that has to be answered is why not? And I am arguing that this is a political pushback against an elite ruling class. And let's not forget, Terry McAuliffe is a representative of the richest, most powerful elements of the ruling class. He is their political flunky, like the Clintons are. Right. And they lost. And I think that's worth celebrating. In Philadelphia, where we also had an election, a friend of mine who was very politically astute and a political operative in the union movement at one time, was working the election. And in the course of it, she was interviewing black folk in West Philadelphia. And in a part of West Philadelphia that is highly populated by black professionals like teachers and lawyers and so on. And what she reports is profound disillusionment with the Democratic leadership of the city of Philadelphia, including and primarily the black misleadership class, as Glenn Ford called them accurately. This disillusionment is across the board in this country. Black and white have not yet made the cross-racial alliance that will be necessary to change things in a fundamental way. Nonetheless, objectively, they have the same disillusionment. But 13% of black folk, according to exit polls, voted for the Republican in Virginia. I don't know what it was in 2020, but the seepage of black people away from the Democratic Party is huge. And we don't yet know how, or at least political scientists have not yet adequately assessed this. If black people withdraw from voting for the Democrats, either by not voting or for voting for the Republicans, the Democratic Party will collapse.
And if that happens, so will the Republican Party shortly thereafter, because its only reason for existing will have disappeared. We got to stop there. We're out of time. We will speak with you again next week, I'm sure.
Thank you.
And that's all the news we have for you right now. For Community Public Radio, I'm Don DeBar in New York. Thanks for listening.